Good morning, English 1150. Thank you so much for your work last week on A Good Man is Hard to Find. I wanted to make a quick comment on the week before where we talked about the necklace, and I wanted to thank you for your contributions to the theme slide deck where you each included a different definition from a different source to try to understand the variations and variety in our definition of theme, for example. The central idea, topic, or point of a story, typically written in the form of a sentence, and how this idea underlies the specific story of the necklace. Here we're thinking about the means by which the necklace carries a deceptive power that Mathilde takes on as someone who wears it, thinking that it transforms her, whereas sort of the necklace actually in fact begins to transform her in her eventual life as she has to repay for the loss of this particular item. A few highlights from the story. I wanted to thank you so much for all of your conversations. Something that I hadn't thought about before that you discussed in your notes was this idea that friendships can also be deceptive, and that friendships between women versus friendships between men are something that Maupassant points out and is very gendered. And I thought that was a really interesting point that a few of you came across. So I just wanted to show you very briefly some of the passages where friends, how sort of the dynamic between friends shifts as a result of gender and as a result of this idea of wealth. High status. A few of you had mentioned this idea of envy and how envy plays into Mathilde's sort of blindness when she discovers this diamond necklace. She wants nothing more than to wear it, to be the envy of the room. And a few of you noticed here that we're discussing Mathilde. She had no dresses, no jewels, nothing, and she loved nothing but that. She felt made for that. She would so have liked to please, to be envied, to be charmed, to be sought after. She had a former friend, schoolmate, at the convent, who was rich and whom she did not like to go and see any more. She suffered so much when she came back. And so thank you, Renee, for pointing out that Mathilde was envious. She's never grateful for what she has. She's constantly unhappy because she always thinks about what she does not have. So much so that she can't actually even sustain her friendship in this past. But here we learn that that passage actually foreshadows what's to come with her friendship with Madame Forestier. Later, when Mathilde complains that she has nothing to wear and her husband suggests that she wear flowers, she says, there's nothing more humiliating than to look poor among other women who are rich. And again, other women, not necessarily friends, but, this sort of idea of being outcast by your gender. But her husband cried, "How stupid you are! Go look up your friend, Madame Forestier, and ask her to lend you some jewels. You're quite thick enough with her to do that." So the next day she went to her friend. And again, what is this relationship like between her and Madame Forestier? When she visits, she sprang upon the neck of her friend, kissed her passionately, then fled with her treasure. It seems like a really give and take kind of relationship, really kind of contractual. She does something for her, and Mathilde does something for Madame Forestier. But this relationship isn't very strong because when Mathilde sort of delays in her return, Mademoiselle Loisel took back the necklace, and Forestier says to her with a chilly manner, "You should have returned it sooner. I might have needed it." She did not open the case as her friend had so much feared. If she had detected the substitution, what would she have thought? What would she have said? Would she have not taken Mademoiselle Loisel for a thief? And so what's at risk here is really it's sort of a friendship, acquaintance friendship, where she's willing to help her borrow something, but what we don't know is that, and what Mathilde doesn't know is that the necklace she lends her is made of paste, and that's something that perhaps a closer friend would have expressed or known. And it seems like between the two, there's more than just a rift between like who they are and how they talk to one another, but also this big social rift that maybe Mademoiselle Forestier knew it was paste and expected Mathilde to recognize that as such, but she can't because of her station. She just looks up to this Mademoiselle Forestier as someone who would never sort of purchase something that's a fake, would only invest in the real jewels. it's not until the very end of this story that Mademoiselle Mathilde goes up to Madame Forestier and she addresses her very informally. She says, the only time in the story, "Good day, Jean." The other, astonished to be familiarly addressed by this plain good wife, did not recognize her at all. She stammered, "But, madame, I do not know. You must have mistaken." "No, I am Mathilde Loisel." Her friend uttered a cry. "Oh, my poor Mathilde, how you have changed!" "Yes, I have had days hard enough since I have seen you, days wretched enough, and that because of you." "Of me? How so?" And so, again, the sort of disconnect between what happens to Mathilde. Apparently, she doesn't know what's happened to her friend over the course of a long time of not seeing her, and so the friendship seems less of a of true friendship and more of kind of this acquaintance, this recognizability that Mathilde uses the relationship for, to borrow this item from her. And so thank you to all of you for pointing out this relationship between Mathilde and Madame Forestier, and also just thinking about the transactional, the sort of transactional chemistry that the two have, how the one upward in society doesn't actually end up recognizing her friend, and how Mathilde goes up to her and still insists that she's her friend, but isn't sort of familiar with her enough to explain what's happened to her until it's way late in her life. So thank you so much for your comments on this, and you've given me a new sort of thoughtscape for thinking about friendships, especially between women in Guy de Maupassant. Thank you also so much for last week addressing A Good Man is Hard to Find by Flannery O'Connor. I hope you enjoyed listening to her recording, and thank you for your contributions to this idea of what exactly does it mean, this title, in terms of understanding our story. A few quick things I wanted to share with you. Last week in the slide deck, you included some images of setting, and here I came across this article by Dan Browner, who is an artist that he says had the opportunity to choose a dream project to illustrate for his master's thesis, which was Flannery O'Connor's A Good Man is Hard to Find. And here is some really great illustrations that he was able to pull together in terms of the setting and characterization. Here's one. It says, "It rose with a snarl and pity sang, the cat sprang onto Bailey's shoulder." So you see all the characters there inside of the car crashing. Here, she would have been a good woman if it had been somebody there to shoot her every minute of her life. And so that was the grandmother, an interpretation of what the grandmother might look like. Here is the house that this author imagines them living in before they left. They left Atlanta at 8:45. Another example of a beautiful setting. The trees were full of silver white sunlight, and the meanest of them sparkled. And finally, "A good man is hard to find," Red Sammy said. "Everything is getting terrible." The place they stop along the way. Some other meanness. There's the misfit. And a few brief comments about a good man is hard to find. I wanted to bring to your attention just some character traits of the grandmother in particular. There's this great article about the evolution of a good woman, it's called. And I can share this with you on Blackboard. But one of the things that we were talking about last week was thinking about how a translation becomes sort of or shifts our idea of what the story says over time, and depending upon who's translating. And for this particular short story, this article brings to light this idea that O'Connor had a few different drafts of A Good Man is Hard to Find, and that in between those drafts, the way in which we understand the grandmother shifts dramatically as well. O'Connor's brilliant revisioning of the manipulative grandmother makes the old woman more responsible for the family's tragedy, yet the misfit brings her to a state of grace. The reader gains more insight into O'Connor's writing process by tracing the grandmother's evolution from being a vain, manipulative hypocrite to being a good woman, and following the story's evolution from the fragment to the 1953, 1955, and 1962 versions. And we read the 1962 version. A Good Man is Hard to Find proves that, like human beings, stories are merely works under construction. So who is the grandmother from A Good Man is Hard to Find, and why is she such an important person to sort of uncover and discover this theme of the story, to find a good person? What is a good person, and how does she sort of misjudge what a good person is? Brienne, you said that Grandma's the kind of person to over worry about everything. Those feelings and emotions play a role in her interactions with Red Sammy, who talked at length about how people are not to be trusted, and she agreed. Then later in the story, it's ironic that she tells the man who is truly not good that he can be good. And it's absolutely right. I think O'Connor does a really nice job of expressing the sort of sentiment that the arbitrariness of the grandmother's understanding of who is good and who isn't. Renee, you said you actually find her selfish. She only thinks about herself. She kept asking, "You wouldn't shoot a lady, would you?" Her purpose of asking this is, it's not because she wouldn't want the misfit to shoot the kids or the others, but so the misfit wouldn't shoot her. She was only trying to save herself, and maybe that's also why she conservatively tells the misfit he's a good man, although she knows he's really not. Absolutely. So that she has some sort of ulterior motives and motivations. One thing that no one necessarily pointed out, which I was surprised by, is the sort of role that Pitti Singh plays in the accident, and also sort of the role that Pitti Singh plays with the grandmother. She brings Pitti Singh the cat along, causes the accident, um, and and then later the grandmother also causes the accident sort of indirectly, as Jen points out, that she remembers that the house, you know, that they were looking for was in Tennessee, was not in Georgia, but in Tennessee. So she's actually misremembered sort of where she told her son Bailey to take them. She said, "We've had an accident." And thank you for noting, Jen, that she does, Flannery O'Connor does read this section with such gusto. I'm glad that you were able to kind of read along her, just to kind of hear how the author expresses and sort of responds to her own writing and phrasing. Not necessarily that it's better or worse than anyone else's, but that it gives you some insight into sort of her composition and strategies for emphasis. And thank you, Taha, for pointing out that this section right here, the horrible thought she had before the accident was that the house she had remembered so vividly was not in Georgia but in Tennessee. And this is just funny how the grandma pointed out the dirt road a mile back, but didn't realize that she is completely in a completely different state. I couldn't stop laughing when I read this part. So thanks for that. I think that there are certainly moments in this short story that ask us to laugh and to see the sort of superfluousness of all of this this road trip. Michael and Jake, you were both thinking about the sort of intuition that the grandmother has, especially in the beginning when her son's reading the newspaper about the misfit, and then later when they encounter the misfit on the road. The grandmother had the peculiar feeling that the bespectacled man was someone she knew, and Michael, you said, as I go back and read, I see that grandmother has a great intuition that foreshadows things into the future. Absolutely. And Jake, you said that you agreed. You instantly knew that it was the misfit. Michaela, thanks so much for your reflection on the irony of the situation. You said that later when the grandmother encounters the misfit, that she, she thinks it's hard to find good people, but she's still in denial that the misfit is as bad as he says he is. She wants to find the good in him and have a conversation when she knows that he very well must have just killed her family. And Taha, you said the grandmother should have known better not to call him the misfit, and also the misfit should have known that what is that poor family going to do, even if they know who you are? The misfit could have drove off even without even trying to help the family instead of killing them. And so, again, yes, thinking about some of your reactions for this ending, I think that, um, you know, there is this like layer of reality. So this is like what happens in the story in terms of plot, but I think that Flannery O'Connor is also doing something in terms of, it is actually, we read this sort of as an allegory. I think, Michaela, you really hinged on Flannery O'Connor's strategy here. The complexities of her writing, her characters are never flat. They're always very dimensional, and that we understand them to be flawed and we understand them to be very human. You said that it's sort of in this final moment, it both complicates and supports the story's title. We see the misfit breaking down for the first time in the story, and the hope arises that he could prove to be a good man deep down as he might cry, but then the same emotion pushes him to shoot the grandmother, ultimately squashing this theory and proving the title philosophy of the story. So, I think this is a really great observation here in terms of a good man is hard to find. I also think that the title, A Good Man is Hard to Find, extends to how we describe and think about the grandmother. So, how a good man, quote unquote, person is hard to find. And so what does that entail? And thank you so much for thinking about, again, the sort of variations and complexities and layers of the characterization in this short story by Flannery O'Connor. I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for listening to these two brief recaps, and please, for this week, listen to my Unit 5 introductory video.